Good morning, Psychology 200. So pardon my look. I was actually just out with my mom. But let's get into it. This week, we're moving into survey research methods. Just remember, though, that you do have a literature review that is coming up. The due date is coming up, but you have some tentative due dates where you could actually submit the literature review, and then I could reread it, edit it, etc. So the date for one of those dates has already passed last Sunday, but this Sunday you can also submit it so I can look at it if you choose to do so. But this week we only have a quiz due. So let's get into survey research methods. Again, this is chapter 9. Let me share my screen with you guys right now. And you should be able to see exactly what I'm seeing right now at this moment. So again, we are going into chapter 9, survey research methods. As usual, on our Blackboard site, you can find the learning objectives in broad format. Again, you can click into week 9 and see it right at the top, the learning objectives for the week. But you will also have them listed here on our PowerPoint slides every single week. So these are to be used to help you with your quiz, right? As well as just, these are learning objectives that you should get at the end of every single week that we have class, right? So make sure you're able to quiz yourself with these learning objectives. Can you explain what a context effect is and give some examples? Can you create a simple survey questionnaire based on principles of good item writing and organization? Can you list the 4 major ways to conduct a survey along with some pros and cons of each? So again, use these learning objectives to quiz yourselves at the end of completing all your tasks for the week. So your tasks for the week usually consist of reading the corresponding chapter, completing the quiz, maybe watching the lecture video, etc. Okay? So let's get into it. So what is survey research? So before we get into that, let me give you a brief introduction and then we can get into what survey research is. So this chapter is going to begin with an overview of survey research, including its definition, some history, and a bit about who conducts it and why they conduct survey research. It progresses to looking at survey responding as a psychological process and the implications of this for conducting good survey questionnaires. Paul Price then concludes the chapter. He concludes some issues related to conducting survey research, including sampling the participants and collecting the data that you're going to be analyzing. So the first section of the survey research chapter is just an overview of survey research. So in this chapter, Paul Price is going to define what survey research is, including its 2 important characteristics. And then he is going to describe some of the ways that survey research is used and give examples. He's going to give examples of the ways that survey research is used. So what is survey research? Survey research is a quantitative approach that has 2 important characteristics, okay? The variables of interest are measured using self-reports. In essence, survey researchers ask their respondents to report directly on their own thoughts, their feelings, and their behaviors. The second important characteristic is considerable attention is paid to the issue of sampling, okay? So survey research may have its roots, not may have its roots, but has its roots in English and American social surveys conducted around the turn of the 20th century by researchers and reformers who wanted to document the extent of social problems such as poverty, okay, such as illnesses, such as diseases. Several researchers who had already made a name for themselves in market research, studying consumer preferences for American businesses, turned their attention to election polling. So currently in 2020, we are going into an election year. The election is actually tomorrow, Tuesday, November 3rd, okay? Election polling is a type of survey research. And what are we kind of researching, right? Or what is the data that we're gonna collect? Those who vote Republican, Democratic, or Independent, and I believe there are about 2 independent candidates running. Okay, so we're about to elect the President of the United States. So that could be either Donald J. Trump, to keep him in office, or we elect a new president. Okay, so that could be Jorgensen, or that could be Biden, etc. Okay, so this is a type of survey. Okay, election polling is a type of survey. During the 1930s, psychologists made important advances in questionnaire design, including techniques that are still used today, such as the Likert scale. So many of you are familiar with the Likert scale. These are questions that take the form of, for instance, how likely are you to experience this on a scale of 1 to 0? How likely are you to do this on a scale of 1 to 10, etc. If you've ever taken a survey with that kind of questionnaire format, you have seen a Likert scale. Okay? Survey research can be used to conduct experiments to test specific hypotheses about causal relationships between variables. And before we move on, again, survey research has its roots in applied social research, marketing research, and election polling. It has since branched out to become an important approach in many academic principles, including political science, poli-sci, sociology, public health, and of course, psychology and social psychology. Okay? Before we move on to this model, and this model actually goes into the second section of chapter 3, I just want to go over some key takeaways from the first section of chapter 9. Okay, so again, survey research is a quantitative approach that features the use of self-report measures on carefully selected samples. It is a flexible approach that can be used to study a wide variety of basic and applied research questions. Survey research has its roots in applied social research, marketing research, and election polling. It has since branched out, of course, to become an important approach in many academic disciplines, including political science, sociology, public health, and of course, psychology. Okay, so the next section goes into constructing survey questionnaires. In this section, Paul Price is going to describe the cognitive process involved with responding to a survey item. He's going to explain what a context effect is, and he's going to give us some examples of that. And he's going to show us how to create a sample survey questionnaire based on principles of good item writing and organization. So here we actually have a model from chapter 9 that you can actually find on page 156 in your textbook. Okay, so this is figure 9.1. It is a model of the cognitive process involved in responding to a survey item. Here, respondents must interpret the question, retrieve relevant information from memory, form a tentative judgment, confirm the tentative judgment, okay, into one of the response options provided, and finally edit the response as necessary. Okay. So again, this is just a cognitive model of the process involved in responding to a survey item. One thing I will suggest with this, and it's not actually written out on the PowerPoint lecture slide, is that the book, or Paul Price, actually gives you an example of a questionnaire using alcoholics. So again, you can find that on page 156 to 157, and using this survey on alcohol consumption, you can actually, from that perspective, you can actually see the cognitive model and how a participant would approach that. Okay, so definitely pause here, look at the figure, but look at the figure along with reading the example of the questionnaire that goes along with the alcoholic questionnaire. Okay, sound good? So let's go on into the section. Okay, so context effects on questionnaire responses. Okay, the heart of any research project is the survey questionnaire itself. Okay, constructing a good survey questionnaire is not easy for several reasons. One, the answer people can be influenced in an unintended way by wording. So you can influence the way someone interprets a question by the wording. It could be also influenced by the order of the item, the response options provided also, and many other factors. At best, these influences add noise to the data. At worst, they result in systematic biases and misleading results. Okay, so again, refer back to the cognitive model figure and the alcoholic questionnaire survey. Pause there and really see how you feel, how your responses to these questions could be influenced by the wording of the survey or questionnaire, by the order of the questions, etc. Okay? So respondents must interpret the questions, retrieve relevant information from memory, form a tentative judgment, convert the tentative judgment into one of the response options provided. So for example, on a rating or on a scale of 1 to 7, and finally edit their responses as necessary. Complexity in context effects can lead to unintended influences on respondents' answers. These effects are not related to the content of the item, but to the context in which the item appears. So that is context effect. Item order effect is when the order in which the items are presented affects people's responses. Okay. Questionnaire items can be either open-ended or closed-ended. Okay. Open-ended items simply ask questions and allow participants to answer in whatever way that they choose or whatever way that they want. Closed-ended items ask a question and provide a set of response options for participants to choose from. Okay. So for example, on a scale of 0, no pain at all, to 10, the worst pain ever or experienced, how much pain would you be in right now? Okay. For a quantitative variable, a rating scale or rate scale is typically provided, which is an ordered set of responses that participants must choose from. Okay, so this is shown in figure 9.2. So here is an example of a rating scale for closed-ended questionnaire items. Okay, so pause here and definitely take a look at this. Okay, this is table 9.2, BRUSO's model of writing good questionnaire items plus examples. Okay, so a rough guideline for writing questionnaire items is provided by BRUSO, the BRUSO model, okay, which is an acronym for brief, relevant, unambiguous, specific, and objective, okay? Every survey questionnaire should have a written or spoken introduction that serves 2 basic functions. The first one is to encourage respondents to participate in the survey, and the second is to establish informed consent. The introduction should be followed by substantive questionnaire items. Demographic items are often presented last because they are least interesting to participants, but also easy to answer in the event respondents have become tired or bored with the survey. Okay. So again, when formatting a questionnaire, we refer back to the BRUSO model of writing a good questionnaire. So pause here. Let me actually move my face up here so you guys can see it all. Okay. So the criteria for the BRUSO model, right? Your question should be brief. Your question should be relevant. Okay. Unambiguous, specific, objective. Okay. But furthermore, every survey questionnaire should have a written or spoken introduction that serves 2 basic functions. We went over those: to encourage respondents to participate in the survey, to establish consent. The introduction should be followed by the substantive questionnaire items as well. Okay? So just some takeaways. Yeah. So just some takeaways from section 2 of chapter 9. Okay. Responding to a survey item itself is complex, a complex cognitive process that involves interpreting questions, retrieving information, making a tentative judgment, putting that judgment into the required response format, and editing the response. Survey questionnaire responses are subject to numerous context effects due to the question wording, the item order, response options, and other factors. Researchers should be sensitive to such effects when constructing their own surveys and interpreting the results as themselves. Survey questionnaire items are either open-ended or closed-ended. Open-ended items simply ask a question and allow respondents to answer in whatever way that they want or choose to. And closed-ended items ask a question and provide several response options that respondents must choose from. According to the BRUSO model, questionnaire items should be brief, relevant, unambiguous, specific, and also objective. The last section that we're going to go into is conducting surveys, right? In this section specifically, Paul Price is going to explain the difference between probability and non-probability sampling and describe the major types of probability sampling that we have. He's then going to define sampling bias in general and non-response bias in particular. He's going to list some techniques that can be used to increase the response rate and reduce the non-response bias. And then lastly, he's going to list the 4 major ways to conduct a survey along with some pros and cons of each. Okay, so let's get into it. Sampling. Okay, this is our final section. Okay, so sampling. Sampling falls into 2 broad categories, probability sampling and non-probability sampling. And pardon me on this slide, the second one is non-probability sampling. I just noticed that it just says probability sampling, probability sampling. But the second one is non-probability sampling. So probability sampling occurs when the researcher can specify the probability that each member of the population will be selected in the sample. Non-probability sampling occurs when the researcher cannot specify these probabilities, okay? Once the population has been specified, probability sampling requires a sampling frame. This is essentially a list of all members of the population from which to select the respondents from, okay? There are a variety of different probability sampling methods, such as simple random sampling, stratified random sampling, cluster sampling, etc. Okay, we'll go over those 3. So simple random sampling is done in such a way that each individual in the population has an equal probability of being selected for the sample. Stratified random sampling is one in which the population is divided into different subgroups or strata, usually based on the demographic characteristic, and then a random sample is taken from each stratum. And then cluster sampling is done in which larger clusters of individuals are randomly sampled, and then individuals within each cluster are randomly sampled, okay? Probability sampling was developed in large part to address the issue of sampling bias, okay? So sampling bias occurs when the sample is selected in such a way that it is not representative of the entire population and therefore produces inaccurate results. If these survey non-responders differ from survey responders in a systematic way, then this can produce non-response bias. Although there are methods for statistically correcting for non-response bias, they are based on assumptions about the non-responders, okay? How large does a survey sample need to be? It depends on 2 factors, the level of confidence in the results that the researcher wants and also the budget of the study. And then we just went over sampling bias, so there's that. Okay, So conducting the survey. There are 4 main ways to conduct surveys, right? And that's in-person interview, by telephone, through the mail, or over the internet, okay? And your book specifically, again, this chapter was super short, but your book goes specifically over all of those, okay? And on top of that, we kind of went over in-person interviews in previous chapters. But nowadays, if any of you have ever taken any kind of survey, it's usually done by telephone or over the internet, not necessarily through mail, and we kind of know why now with all the controversy about that. So I'm not saying whether or not it's accurate or not, but your book goes into those. Okay, so that's it for survey research. Again, very, very short, easy, okay? It's not easy to create a survey, okay, or conduct the survey, but there's not much to it. It's just hard to collect the sample, and it's hard to create a good one, okay? So there you go with chapter 9, survey research. Sound good? And again, as usual, if you have any questions pertaining to the literature review, opening quizzes, etc., simply email me or hit me up on my cell, okay? Bye, guys.